Hi Jay, hi Matt.
Hey guys. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We're going to give it just another minute before we get started, as there's still people joining in the call, but we'll give it one more minute and then we will get going with our training material. Thanks for being here.
When you're driven to get the job done right, the days are long and the miles are many. You can't accept good enough, and you don't believe in limits. To make something truly better than before, to make it last, you never settle and demand a higher level of precision. Day in and day out, we're on that path, advancing filtration science, developing superior filtration technologies to keep you going, to ensure your performance now and in the future, to protect, to go further, to keep you going. Run cleaner, longer, with the certainty of filtration science.
All right, everybody, welcome and hello. Thank you so much for being on today's Fleetschool live training brought to you by Fleetguard. Hopefully you're in the right place. We're today going to be talking about telematics for engine consumables, and we're going to be discussing really the future of diesel engine maintenance through smart sensors, onboard diagnostics, and the pursuit of maximizing uptime and reducing that total cost of ownership. It's a really fascinating topic. I'm excited to share some of the Fleetguard solutions that we think can help you and your customers as you're trying to chase ways to optimize the fleet through condition-based maintenance. For those that I have not had the pleasure of meeting before, my name is Jay Stevenson. I am the North America training leader for the Fleetguard business brand of Atmos Filtration Technologies. I'm based here in Nashville, Tennessee, and it's great to be spending a little bit of time with you guys today. I do want to point out we've got a few other folks here on the call from the Fleetguard side of things. Actually, our team that works exclusively on our FleetguardFIT system. So as we kind of go through and talk about the materials today, I would very much encourage you, if you have questions, please drop your questions in the Q&A window or that chat window here in Zoom. They're on the backside of this as a panelist, so they can help answer some questions as in real time as we're going along. We at the end will have time for questions, some dedicated time at the end for Q&A. So feel free to wait to the end if you want, but if you want to go ahead and ask your questions as we're going along through the material, please don't hesitate, and we'll do our best to get you some answers directly here in the chat. So without much further ado, let's go ahead and just jump right into our materials. If you think about the way that today's trucks and equipment are typically serviced, uh, those maintenance intervals or service intervals that are published by the original equipment manufacturer, by the OEM, are typically based on duty cycles that the engine or equipment are going to experience. However, those standard duty cycles or prescribed service intervals may not always account for non-standard conditions. Because let's face it, we live in a non-standard world, and there's always going to be dynamic changing variables that create atypical circumstances for the engines or equipment that you're tasked with maintaining or helping your customers maintain. And think about it. Once you thread on that lube filter, that oil filter, or a fuel filter, or once you install that air filter into the housing, or maybe once you refill that engine with fresh oil during an oil change, an oil service, you really don't know how those critical engine consumables are going to be performing over the coming days, weeks, and months, unless there's a problem, at which point it's usually already too late. On the flip side, we don't always know if we're going to be changing those engine consumables too soon or too frequently, at which point we're wasting precious resources. We're bringing those vehicles or those machines in for service and therefore losing productivity. And of course, that's also a problem as well. So, wouldn't it be nice to know precisely how your filters, how your fluids, your oils are performing on any given vehicle or piece of equipment around the clock, 24/7, regardless of their location? That's kind of the dream, right? Well, we're bringing dreams to reality. That's what FleetguardFIT is all about. So, FleetguardFIT is FIT stands for Filtration Intelligence Technology, and this is really the diesel industry's first comprehensive real-time filtration and oil quality monitoring solution. It's based on smart sensors, the cloud, the infamous or famous cloud that everyone's heard about, and of course, advanced analytics. This comprehensive filtration monitoring system is available for filters, which can include lube oil filters, fuel filters, and even air filters, and as we're going to see, oil quality as well. And they provide real-time status updates so that maintenance can be based on real-world conditions instead of subjective timing or guesswork. And as you think about FleetguardFIT and how it can really benefit you or maybe benefit your customers, if depending on who you are here on the call, there's a couple of ways I think, broadly speaking, that really bring value to the user. The first of which is when utilized properly, FleetguardFIT can establish predictive condition-based maintenance. So what does that mean? Well, that means we're going to enable the user to optimize their maintenance spend since you're only replacing those consumables, the filters and fluid, when you need to. So we're not going to change things based on guesswork or a certain set interval amount of time. We're going to actually look at the data, and based on the data, that's when we're going to make our maintenance decisions. So it's a good way to optimize that maintenance spend. And maybe secondly here, another angle from this is FleetguardFIT can help reduce maintenance costs by protecting the engine or the equipment system through real-time alerts of early problem detection, which are then shared with the customer. Think of it kind of like a crystal ball telling you when a problem is on the horizon, but maybe hasn't yet occurred. And so it enables the customer to take direct action and hopefully stop the situation before it gets any worse or leads to catastrophic engine failure. So, thinking about this broadly speaking, right? Knowledge is power. And FleetguardFIT gives the customer that knowledge, those precision insights to make the right maintenance decisions for their vehicles and equipment. But how exactly does FleetguardFIT work? So, at a high level, you've got some hardware and some software coming together to provide the customer with that real time information about how all these things are performing on the engine. Of course, over time, as those sensors monitor the performance and characteristics of those consumables, we as Fleetguard and monitoring with FleetguardFIT are going to provide those tactical, actionable insights to the customer whenever the data suggests that something may need attention. And based on those alerts, the customer then can decide whether they want to stop that vehicle or bring that piece of equipment in to perform maintenance, either as a preventative situation, preventing damage, or as we said, optimizing service and maybe simply aligning service intervals as an efficiency improvement. So, at a high level, right, for any vehicle or piece of equipment where FleetguardFIT has either been retrofitted or installed from the OEM, the integrated FIT sensors are going to gather that data on the installed Fleetguard filters or engine, gathering that engine performance. So it could be the oil quality. They're going to gather those insights. And this performance data is collected and then sent through the vehicle or equipment's existing telematics service provider, or TSP for short. So it's going to kind of ride off the back of that telematics service provider's platform. It's going to go to a cloud platform where it can then be analyzed, right? So we're going to kind of take that raw data, crunch the data, and start to make sense of what we need to do with it. So after that data has been analyzed using our proprietary algorithms, the customer then has the ability to access those real-time actionable insights, that real-time data on either a FleetguardFIT portal dashboard. So we have our own portal that you can log into as a customer using this and look at the data. We have that available as both a mobile app or a desktop combination, or if you need some sort of mix of both of those things, we can offer that. Or if you have your own customer portal, depending on how you want to monitor that information, we may be able to work with you to actually integrate it into your own existing portal. So that's really simplistic. That's a simplistic look at sort of how it works. We're collecting the data, essentially feeding the data off of the machine into a platform where we analyze the data, kind of do the magic behind the scenes work. And then you're able to access that information on a portal where it's made easy to see, easy to understand, and you can take action based on the data that's being provided there. Probably digging a little deeper under the surface. It's a little more complicated than that, but I would encourage you, if you're listening and maybe thinking, oh, I don't know if I'm not sure if I would be able to handle all of that. Really, the good news here is that the FleetguardFIT team, they really handle the complicated steps. So if you're not really sure about how a telematics service provider works, or how to maybe do the install here, or maybe even what you need, that's okay. The FleetguardFIT team, as I mentioned, they're here on the call. They can help you through that process. And so I would encourage you, if you're maybe interested in what we're talking about today, don't let sort of the new technology intimidate you or scare you. We can help make it easy. We can help make it simple. And they've done that with many customers already to this date. Now, I did mention that FleetguardFIT is available to the customer via a portal. So you can access that on desktop or mobile app. Or again, you can use a portal of your choice if we have a way to interface with that from our cloud. But an interesting thing to kind of consider as you think about this too, this access does come through a subscription. So as you kind of think about the hardware that comes along with the FleetguardFIT package, there is kind of a software side of it and kind of a data subscription side of it. So think about like going and buying a new iPhone, a new cell phone. You can go buy the phone, but unless you are also accessing the data side of it, the phone's probably not going to do a whole lot of good. So it kind of works the same way with FleetguardFIT. It's kind of two pieces to the puzzle. It is going to provide the proactive, actionable recommendations to the customer, so you can make your own decisions regarding maintenance. So we're not going to tell you what to do. We're just going to give you our recommendations based on the data. This is what we would recommend. It's ultimately up to the customer to make those maintenance decisions, whether they want to stop a vehicle or stop a piece of equipment to service or not. That's up to the customer. We're just giving you the information to make decisions. Now, as you look at the screen here, right, this is kind of a snapshot. I'm not really going to go too deep into the portal today, but this is a kind of a snapshot of what that portal looks like. And so, of course, if you have multiple pieces of equipment that have FleetguardFIT installed, you simply select from kind of a home dashboard which machine you want to look at. And as you bring that up, you'll get a screen similar to what you see here. So depending on what sensors you've decided to opt in for with that particular machine, you'll be able to look at each of those items, each of those consumables on that particular machine. So here we're looking at an example, haul truck, some sort of off-highway piece of equipment. And we can see they've got oil quality sensor, they've got fuel filter sensors, they've got a lube filter and air filter. So they're kind of running the full package. And it's just basically giving you a simple readout there using some color coding and using some dials there to basically tell you what that restriction level looks like or what that remaining service life looks like. And so really just makes it easy, makes it simple to understand how the filters, how the oil performing in real time on that machine. I would say if you are curious to see more of what a user would see and actually kind of get a real demo of this, we can probably set up some time with you if you'd like to kind of do that one-on-one. I'm going to have our FIT team's contact information at the end of this presentation. So if you'd like to see a little bit more of a peek behind the curtain there, very much encourage you to reach out. We'd love to talk with you about it and kind of show you the capabilities here, the bells and whistles that come along with using the system. So we've talked about the usefulness of FleetguardFIT and how it works at a high level and some of the different ways you can access that information. But I did want to talk just a little bit about the connected markets that we have today. So as you think about the different types of customer markets and market segments that have been using FleetguardFIT over the years, this kind of gives you a snapshot. And what you'll notice is it's basically anywhere and everywhere. Over the road, off the road, stuff that's going out on water, brown water, blue water. FleetguardFIT really is a versatile piece of technology that can be used in a wide variety of customer applications. The technology, I would say, was really born out of the high horsepower market. So as you think about mining applications, things like haul trucks, shovels, those types of machines, that's really where FleetguardFIT started back in the day. And of course, we've kind of spread it out to many different customers since that time. But of course, that makes sense, right? The cost of those machines, cost of downtime, that was really a market that made a lot of sense for us to begin with. But we've quickly worked our way into power generation units, rental accounts that lend out construction equipment like dozers and excavators, graders, water trucks, things along those lines. But there's a lot of variation of customers that have been using it. So as you kind of think about, one of the questions I had for the FIT team as we began building these materials out was, who do we really see latching on to FIT, really getting a lot of benefit out of it, and where we've had some really great customer success. And these were some of the examples of customers that we've seen. So again, high horsepower mining markets especially, but also large power generation units, again, where it's very important for them to make sure that they're managing that uptime for those applications using those large power generation units. As I mentioned, some of the rental companies that do rent out machines like construction equipment or kind of off-highway equipment, where the customers may grab that machine and go take it, use it for a while, bring it back, and it's a great way for the companies that lend out that rental equipment to keep an eye on exactly how those machines are being serviced, how they're being maintained, or how they're being used. And so it gives them kind of that mind's eye while their assets are basically out in the field. We've also been working more recently with some customers in over-the-road settings as well. You'll notice on the bottom there, cement mixing trucks. These are applications that do drive over the road, but they also go out into very dusty, dirty environments, driving around quarries and places like that. So it's a great way to, again, get that full visibility of condition-based maintenance. So they're operating in a variety of environments, and maybe that typical service life isn't always what they're seeing. So it's a great way for them to keep track. Another one there on the left, so these yard spotter trucks that are very prevalent around terminals and places where they're having to move trailers around. We've had some great success with those type of customers as well, and it's just a great way for them to have a good sense of exactly what those duty cycles look like, when they really should be changing the oil on those engines, and helps them just optimize that maintenance spend and also keep an eye on any sort of problems that may be rearing up beneath them. But just naming a few popular applications here, as mentioned earlier, broad range of customer base that can see benefits here, and that those payback periods as well can also come along very quickly depending on the size and value of those machines. Did want to also point out, as you think about our experience using FleetguardFIT, we have currently customers using FleetguardFIT in at least 25 countries today, and we've accumulated as many as 10 million hours worth of data over the last decade that we've been field testing and commercializing FleetguardFIT. So a ton of information, wealth of experience, wealth of knowledge from a variety of customers. And, we've really kind of proven it out in the real world with some of those customers. Um, been using it, and really, as you think about some of the places that you're seeing here on the screen, some of the harshest and most remote locations around the world, and that Fleetguard filtration science methodologies really kind of, again, put that proof out there for the customer. They can really understand exactly what's happening with their machines and make better decisions with that insight. So I did want to talk through a little bit of the technology and go through the current sensors that we have in our lineup today and the ways that they can provide data insights for your engine consumables. So one of the main kind of stalwart parts of our FleetguardFIT product portfolio here is the system health sensor. Really, this is the filtration monitoring system box that is essentially collecting and gathering the data. It's kind of the brain of the operation, if you want to think of it that way. So this is going to work to collect sensor input data. It's going to process that data in a way that's kind of meaningful for the customer as it then sends that out to be analyzed by our algorithms. So a couple of things you'll notice there in the screen, it is going to monitor connectivity status. So in the event that some sort of functionality is lost in the system where it's no longer collecting data, it's going to alert the system. It's going to alert the user that, hey, this thing is not receiving input anymore. You need to take a look and check on it. So any sort of sensor issues, any anomalies there, or when that data is again out of range or not being picked up, this is the part, kind of the brain of that central nervous system there, that's going to alert that, hey, we're not getting the input that we're supposed to be getting. Above that, though, is the oil quality sensor, and this is really, an interesting piece of technology here that is taking measurements of the parameters of an engine's lubricating oil, that lube oil, and it's going to monitor things like the remaining oil life or those levels of deterioration. So this oil quality sensor, it's detecting anomalies or irregularities that could be caused by problems in an engine system. So things like coolant dilution, fuel dilution, or even using the incorrect fluid in that system. So using a lubricant or fluid that is not the one that was supposed to be in the system, it's going to detect those things as well. So I wanted to walk through a couple of slides here that actually show some real world examples of how each of these sensors operate. So we're going to take a look here at a couple of slides, 2 or 3 slides here on this oil quality sensor. We're leaving the names and additional details out to protect the innocent. But this particular slide, you can see here, condition monitoring. So in this slide, we are looking at a particular customer with a fleet of applications, fleet of engines, and we are simply looking at the condition of the oil, monitoring that, and letting the customer know when the oil has reached the end of its useful life. So this is, I want to be really clear, this is not the same thing as on your vehicle when you do an oil change and you have that remaining oil health life kind of time-based sensor in that system. This is not a time-based sensor. This is actually measuring the physical parameters of that oil and letting you know when that oil starts to degrade or starts to have a problem. So here you can see kind of across that timeline, we're kind of tracking there from around November of 22 up through July of 2023. You can see that trend line where as it trends up towards the warning level, which is kind of that yellow line across, and then up towards red would be sort of critical, right? Like totally reached end of life. You need to replace your oil right now. So really simple way for the customer to see exactly what kind of life they're getting out of the lubricant they're using for their engines. And it allows them to use that condition-based maintenance plan for optimizing the way they spend the money on maintaining those engines. So here's maybe some anomalies we're going to track. So this is an example here with coolant dilution. So the customer here was essentially picking up data that something's wrong with the oil. And after going and flagging that and bringing the vehicle in and looking at the application, it was determined that there was an oil cooler failure, and that oil cooler was leaking coolant into the engine's oil, into that lube system. So as you can kind of see there from the graph, we're trending normal degradation line, and then all of a sudden a big spike. We're seeing a big spike in the chemical kind of physical parameters of that oil. And that is just a red flag right off the bat. Hey, something's going on here. Something's not right. We're able to alert the customer, hey, there's a problem with this particular vehicle, this particular application. You probably want to take a look at it. And so the customer did bring the vehicle in. They go and look at it and determine, yes, there is an oil cooler failure. This is what was causing the issue. And so they were able to, stop the situation before they suffered catastrophic engine failure, as a worst case scenario. So this is kind of a preventative use of the tool, but very, very, very helpful for, the customer to see the data and go and validate the data, confirm, yes, there is an issue. And now we're able to avoid the problem that otherwise would have gone undetected until there was a, serious failure. Similar situation here, but a different fluid diluting that oil. So this is one where a fuel pump actually began to fail, and it was allowing fuel, so some of that diesel fuel, to actually leak into that lube system, into the engine. So similar situation here. We're seeing some trend lines there of that oil over time. And now we're seeing a sudden drop in that viscosity. So that sort of thickness or thinness of the oil. We're seeing a drop there. So something about the physical parameters of that oil have changed, gone outside the normal thresholds of what we would consider safe. And they were able to take action with some, even getting some oil samples and doing an analysis there. And yes, the oil had lost quite a bit of viscosity, and they would have seen progressive engine wear and could have seen catastrophic engine damage if this had gone unchecked. So another situation where that preventative maintenance really helped the customer out. They would have never probably known that this was going on until there was a very expensive problem to fix. So that's the oil quality sensor. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of a sense of kind of what this thing can do, how it can help the customer, how it brings benefit by detecting any of those anomalies, or just as the oil wears out over time, you can really get a sense of what does my true oil life look like. The next sensor I wanted to bring up was our liquid filter sensor. So this hardware is really designed to measure the changing conditions, those differential pressures across a liquid filter. And so really we're talking about fuel and lube filters in this instance. And it's going to correlate that pressure change, that differential pressure, to the remaining service life, that remaining useful life of those lube or fuel filters. And that way the customer can more accurately optimize the maintenance processes for their vehicles and equipment. So I wanted to look at a couple of examples here as well of kind of how this works and what we would be looking for. So this slide here is showing the typical alert for an engine lube filter. So that graph on the bottom left, in kind of the bottom left corner, again, we're seeing the kind of those turquoise kind of blue dots running up there. That is your pressure, those delta pressure levels there, kind of trending upwards as the filter is taking on more fluid. The useful life is kind of being used up across that time. So we're starting there in kind of middle of July 2023, working our way up towards September, and we see, hey, something's wrong. This filter is kind of it's getting really close to end of life. So that warning is then sent out at kind of where that yellow line comes across there and starts to meet up. So we're seeing, hey, this filter is reaching the end of its useful life based on the restriction level we're seeing. And we can go ahead and pass that information along to the customer. Now, from the example email alert, right, this is basically something that would be passed along to the customer, and it's going to tell them essentially what's happening on what particular application with that equipment ID, and what type of alert it is, and what that information looks like. So we can see 84% of useful life of this lube filter has been used up based on that changing differential pressure. And we're going to even go ahead and give a prognostic or sort of predictive case of the remaining useful life left. So days remaining, we're estimating about 15 days left, hours remaining, about 147 hours left. So it's to that level of detail we can tell the customer, hey, sometime here in the next 2 weeks, that filter is going to hit the end of that useful life. You probably want to start considering lining up a service event for this machine or for this application, bringing it in so that you can get that oil filter changed and change that oil out as well. So another situation here, this is on the fuel side of things. So similar type of graph, right? We're looking at a timeline there across the bottom with differential pressures running up the y-axis. And we can see, yes, this filter is loading over time. It's getting more and more plugged, more and more restricted. We're going to cross that warning threshold there around 200 kPa or across that differential pressure. And as we start to reach up towards that critical alert, we're going to send that out as well. And we're really letting the customer know, hey, you're getting close to the end of this filter's life. You want to start thinking about uh, setting up or lining up this truck or vehicle to come in for service. And you can have all the right parts and replacement parts there so we can make that a very efficient change on the fuel filter. So a couple of examples there on the liquid filter sensor, measuring again those differential pressures, and it really helps the customer understand exactly when they should be changing these things out. So our last sensor we want to talk a little bit about today is our air filter sensor. You guys may have heard about this one before. I know I typically cover it when we do cover air filtration training as well, but this is part of our FleetguardFIT product lineup. So as you think about FleetguardFIT and this particular tool, this is a really, really handy one because it's going to take a lot of the guesswork out of changing air filters. And there is quite, from my understanding, as I've talked to a lot of shops, a lot of technicians, a good bit of changing air filters is either based on guesswork or some sort of set interval, and really neither of those are great ways to decide when to change your air filter. So let's talk a little bit about this, right? Just some kind of basics, air filter basics here. So when you think about an air filter, right, we've looked at some of these restriction graphs, plug-in graphs. One of the interesting things to note is that an air filter does tend to operate a little bit differently than a liquid filter. So if we go back, I'll even scroll back, right? If we look at some of these graphs, typically, as you see a new fuel filter or a new lube filter, they tend to be pretty efficient when they're brand new. And over the course of their life, they tend to kind of lose some of that efficiency and they start getting more and more restricted, more and more plugged. And then you do have to change them. On an air filter, it kind of works a little differently. Air filters are actually the least efficient at capturing dust particles or airborne particles when they're brand new. And the reason for that is air filters actually build up a layer of kind of dust or debris as a cake filtration method on the outside. So we actually need contaminant on the outside of that filter to allow that efficiency to increase. So if you think about that and how that works, air filters generally let in the most, or let through on the clean side, the most debris and contaminant, those airborne dust particles, when they're brand new. Kind of in those first few percentage points of an air filter's life is usually when they're letting the most stuff through. And then, of course, as that dust and debris builds up on the outside, it actually creates more of a filtering effect, and that efficiency will increase. So you think about initial efficiency. That's kind of a term you may have heard before. Initial efficiency on an air filter is really important because that's the time, again, where we normally would see maybe more debris or particles work their way through. So we actually want to have a really efficient initial efficiency. And then, of course, as that efficiency it'll generally kind of increase as it goes along as the filter becomes more and more restricted. And then you do reach a point where you need to replace the filter. So that restriction is going to increase. It's going to get close to that terminal restriction point. We're going to service the filter. It's time to replace it. And then that restriction level will drop back down again, obviously, as it's new. So as we think about how that works, it's really just proving the point to us, air filter service life is not set based on a preset amount of time. So as you think about maybe reading some of the, again, OEM guidelines or service documents for a particular application, oftentimes they'll they'll state a certain number of hours or a certain amount of time before replacing them. And the trouble with that is you could be changing that air filter too soon. There could still be quite a bit of life left in that air filter, depending on the environment. There could also be you could also be running that air filter too long. If you just say 6 months, well, you might be operating in an environment, or maybe during a particular set of time, you went through an environment that was incredibly dusty and dirty. That air filter might be restricted before that 6 month interval. So, predetermined amount of time is not really a good way to manage when to change the air filter. So, if that's the case, when should we be replacing air filters? What's the trick here? How do we know when to replace an air filter? Well, the industry standard for a long time were these little guys, these air restriction gauges. These have been the standard for a long time. These little filter minder gauges. Many of your vehicles and equipment will come installed with these from the factory, and these really are kind of the minimum expectation of what you should be using to determine when to change your air filter. Of course, uh, as I've talked to a lot of technicians and a lot of folks out across various industries, not everyone puts a lot of stock in these. They can have kind of false readings. They're not easy to read sometimes. They get damaged very easily. So, they do have their drawbacks, but at the end of the day, we want to make sure we're using a restriction gauge to determine when to change the air filter. Now, as a part of FleetguardFIT, we think we've got an improved solution that really takes this idea and moves it to the next level. So we're going to watch just a quick video that talks a little bit about this. All right, so the LED air restriction indicator. This is a pretty neat little tool that makes serviceability very, very simple and very straightforward on when to replace your air filters. It does, kind of like the little video showed, it provides instant readings or readouts there on the air filter life, remaining service life. Uh, because of that digital connectivity, it actually is programmed with some logic, so it's going to avoid false readings. Basically, restriction levels have to be met for a certain amount of time before it will actually trigger and kind of move on to the next color, working its way up from green to red. But the really neat thing here, right, is like we talked about, if you've got customers or you yourself are just replacing air filters, every 3 months, every 6 months, or ever annually maybe, right? This is a way to help you determine when you really should be changing them. And we've had quite a few customers that have used this that were changing the air filters far too frequently. And, again, if you're over servicing, you're actually exposing that system to more dust and debris than you would be otherwise. So we're going to help you avoid that. We're going to help you save some money on your maintenance spend, and we're going to reduce that chance of downtime uh, by making sure you're keeping this system up to date and servicing the filters when you're supposed to be. It is a fairly quick and easy installation on any application. So as you kind of think about all makes opportunities, this can go on any of the applications we've looked at on previous slides. We've got some examples of places where we've installed it on even like a test vehicle there, a Dodge Ram. So right there in the air intake box, and you can see exactly what that looks like in broad daylight with that nice bright LED color popping there on the screen. And so, really, really cool little gadget that's going to make maintenance just easier for you and your business. So as you can kind of see there, comparing there, a comparison there between those manual restriction gauges and the LED gauge, much more accurate, much more reliable with that continuous measurement in a digital format. And that quick, easy color makes it a very nice visual for technician or operator to just quickly be able to look under the hood or quickly be able to look out behind the cab of the equipment and just see exactly what's going on with the air filter. You can integrate this into the FleetguardFIT package where, if you want to actually be collecting data off of the air filters as well, not just using it for a pure visual, you can do that also. So if you want to really get into the data side of it, like we've been talking about with the other sensors, you can do that on this sensor as well too. So there's 3 part numbers that we have for this today. I know the video mentioned that SK15959, but we've got a couple other parts there too, SK15960 and SK15967. Really, these are all going to look the same, other than that part number on the far right does include a fitting and a grommet, so that in the instance where there was not already a filter minder gauge installed, you can essentially tap, drill your own hole and install this, on the air intake system. But the part numbers on the left are designed to essentially replace one of those existing filter minder gauges. So pretty handy. They can be used in a variety of applications. If you're not, I will say if you've got a particular application in mind and you're not sure which one you should pick, which one of these you should use, just reach out, just ask us, ask the FIT team. Again, you've got those experts here on the call today. We're happy to make sure you get pointed in the right direction on this sensor. So just a couple of examples like we've been showing for the other sensors. I wanted to show just a little bit of ways that people have used the air restriction gauge with the actual digital readout, collecting data of how they've used it for their benefit. So these are some air filter blockage events, right, where the air filter was, picking up either progressive filter loading, where the filter was doing its thing, but it's starting to reach sort of end of life. That's really more of the graph at the top. So we're seeing that continual loading there from, looks like October of 23, kind of working its way up to November of that same year of 23. So, kind of more of a progressive loading going on there. We're going to reach that warning level, and we're going to indicate to the customer, hey, you're getting close to end of service life on this air filter. You probably want to start thinking about getting some service lined up. Example 2 at the bottom, though, this is more of an anomaly, right, where something abnormal is happening in the system, and we want to make sure the customer knows so they can take quick action if possible. So one of the air filters on this particular system, you can see that this particular system had, it looks like 6 air filters. Each of those lines, color-coded lines there, different air filter. One of those air filters saw a really severe spike, and this is a high horsepower application. So something went wrong, and that air filter was, loading much more quickly than the others. And so we need to figure out what's going wrong. You want to shut this system down so you don't have, catastrophic engine failure. And this is a great way to catch those kind of preventative things before it becomes a much more serious situation, especially as you think about high horsepower, very, very expensive equipment, multi-million-dollar machines. And so we want to, provide any advantage for these customers as possible. And oftentimes it's just a simple thing where maybe a service cover fell off the air intake housing, or something was forgotten to be put back on. It's a quick catch for those type of things out in the real world. Then one other one, again, kind of similar situation here, where we're seeing, rapid air filter blockage. So something happened where that system got in front of a lot of airborne debris or contaminant, and it loaded that filter incredibly quickly. And we want to make sure the customer, knows that as quick as possible, so they're not suffering any sort of engine damage or premature failures. And then, as you think about kind of ways to optimize, right? Like we definitely, one of the ways we've talked about Fit, how Fit can help these telematics for engine consumables is we definitely are looking for those problems as they occur. But oftentimes, there aren't really problems, but we can still help the customer again optimize those maintenance intervals. So in a traditional setting where maybe the customer was changing the air filters out, in this example, it looks like, about every 400 hours, 450 hours. That was just what they were doing based on procedure, and really looking at the data and helping them determine, hey, based on the way this equipment's being used in the environment it's being used in, really you could run that filter out to more like 1,000 hours. And so now instead of, basically about every 2.5 times, we're able to reduce that spend and save the customer a significant amount of money, and also raise that uptime up and that productivity. So I'm actually going to pass over one of the other neat tricks that we have with FleetguardFIT is this new ability for peer performance analysis. So as you think about possibly a fleet of trucks, or a situation maybe out on a mine site where they've got similar equipment driving around in the same environment, sometimes you have sort of problem children of equipment where we're going to start seeing trends. We're going to start seeing trends of particular failures, particular pieces of equipment that may be going through consumables more quickly than others. And so we actually have a way to sort of bring some peer analysis into the equation. And I'm going to invite Brandon Brenton, one of our Fit team experts, on to just talk with us a little bit, Brandon, about this peer performance analysis and kind of what the value is for the customer.
For sure. Thanks, Jay. So as Jay said, I'm Brandon, based out of Columbus, Indiana. I'm a senior account specialist.
Brandon, I'm not hearing you. If you want to just double check your mic, make sure it's going through the right input, please.
Hey, Jay, can you hear me?
Still not picking you up, Brandon. Oh, Phil, if you want to jump in, take a shot.
Well, I was just going to mention, Jay, I can hear Brandon. I'm not sure if the audience can or not.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah. So looking at the comments, it looks like everybody can hear you, Brandon.
Okay. Yeah. It's. I think it was a problem on my end. That's my bad. You guys go for it.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Jay. As Jay mentioned, I'm senior account specialist supporting the FleetguardFIT product line and the peer performance analysis tool. This is a tool that's within the FleetguardFIT portal, and it's going to allow you to conduct a fleet analysis between the sites that you have, application, the different fleets, and even the different engine models that you may have. This will enable you to identify high performance equipment and also help you be able to find those naughty, the problem child, right? Like kind of Jay mentioned, I guess another way to put that is to single out individual equipment with reliability issues. So this tool helps you do that. It also will enable you to set benchmark expectations for consumables, such as identifying the most utilized filter type within a peer group. You can identify the most prominent alert type received within a peer group. It also allows you to identify consumables that contribute to the most anomaly alerts and identifying the filters that receive the most diagnostic alerts. So it's just a great way to be able to have a holistic view of your entire fleet and I guess the health of your entire fleet. So really exciting tool, a lot of good metrics and ways to just optimize your maintenance as a fleet as a whole. Thanks, Trey.
That's perfect, Brandon. Thanks. Apologies there for throwing you under the bus. It was looking at me. I was the problem.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah, very, very neat, neat way for us to leverage the data and really, again, problem solve for the customer, help the customer figure out how can they better run their business, keeping these, kind of engine consumables sort of there in the forefront, right? It is an expense to your business, and we want to find a way for you to manage that as best as possible. And so this peer analysis, which is a more recent development for the Fit team, a really fantastic way for the customer to have that information. Like we said, information, knowledge, data, this is power, and being able to leverage it properly is really the most powerful way to take advantage of it. So Very cool. If you guys have more questions on that, obviously, please feel free to ask in the chat window. We're kind of getting towards the end of our presentation today. I did want to just point out some additional places you can go get more information. If you'd like to go visit our fleetguard.com website, you can go there and look at some of the information we've got on the site regarding FleetguardFIT. We've got quite a few documents out in kind of the literature section of our website where you can read all about some of the sensors we've talked about, some of the value proposition around the different tools that we have as part of this portfolio. I would also encourage you to go to our YouTube channel. Out on the YouTube channel, we've got some really good videos on FleetguardFIT, particularly a couple of the ones on the LED air restriction indicator. We've even got an install video that shows you how to do that quick installation. It's pretty painless. So that would be a good place to go for information. Beyond that, on our website, on the FleetguardFIT page, you'll see also a contact form, some blank field forms there where you can send an email in to our FIT team if you've got some questions, or maybe you think you've got a lead on somebody that might be interested in this, or if you yourself are interested. You can also just email directly the FleetguardFIT team, and the email address I've got linked there or listed there on the site or on the slide there in yellow. So it's the one highlighted there in the bottom left corner. That team would be great to reach out to if you've got specific questions. Maybe you think of something later on beyond our presentation today. That team's awesome. They would be more than happy to talk with you and try to talk through the details of how maybe you could bring this into reality for either yourself or your own business, or if you've got customers you think could be interested in this solution. So wanted to provide that information today. And beyond that, folks, as you think about filtration intelligence technology, this is the future of engine filtration, and that's what FleetguardFIT is all about. So this time, folks, I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to take a pause here, and if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, anything that would be valuable to ask, I'm going to go ahead and just open that up at this time, and we're glad to take some questions from you guys.
Hey, Jay, we have a question from Jeff on the line about the air filter sensor. So, Jeff, I'll go ahead and take a moment to just answer that over the line here. But the barbed fitting with the grommet is an added component if needed. So most of the time, air boxes will have the thread that's already built into the air box, so the mechanical air restriction sensor can thread directly on there. Our sensor can thread directly onto those existing threads. So those threads match on our LED sensor the same that are on the mechanical restriction indicator. So in some cases, there are press-in barbed mechanical restriction indicators already on certain air boxes, so those could be a direct replacement, and so that you can pull those out and put ours directly in its place with the barb that's included in that one specific kit. But if you just have a thread on an existing thread on your airbox, our sensor will mount right on there directly to avoid any of the barb fitting in the grommet. Hope that answers the question, but if not, feel free to spell out another one if you would like to.
Perfect, Phil. Thank you. And Jeff had a kind of a follow-up question there, it looks like, too. So essentially asking about how the FMS box, like how are we connecting to the vehicle's TSP? Is that internally mounted in the cab or externally mounted? Can you kind of walk us through sort of what that looks like?
Yeah, so in terms of the electronics module that we have, I'm assuming that's the one you're talking about, the one that Jay showed. It will connect to the TSP through typically a 3-pin or a 9-pin connector based on what your equipment uses. In terms of where it's and that's typically based on how the CAN bus network runs and is routed on the vehicle. That seems to vary across different engines, but essentially the CAN connection that needs to be present will be either a 3-pin Deutsch or a 9-pin. And so we would connect off of that, off of our electronics module to connect to the CAN bus network, and then through that same harness can be routed to the telematics device or the TSP. And in terms of the mounting location, typically the TSPs are going to be mounted in a cab. However, and then typically with the antenna routed, above that on, externally mounted somewhere with the antenna. And so we often will just put our electronics module wherever the TSP is as well. That's kind of the general rule of thumb we follow, just to keep those two components together. Cut down on wiring harness lengths and that sort of thing as well. But that can vary just based on the equipment. That's not a hard requirement by any stretch. So that's kind of a as needed scenario.
Perfect, Phil. Thank you for walking through that.
Yeah, and so the RP 1226 connector, they make a splitter for that, so that you can get a splitter that can go from the RP 1226 and split to another RP 1226 as well as a 9-pin. Oftentimes that's what we've used in the past. We'll just split that to a 9-pin directly with the splitter, as well as when you use the splitter, it provides that extra RP 1226 connector if you use that for diagnostics purposes, but allows us to have the 9-pin to route to our hardware as well. And if there's a specific installation type of question, we don't want, Jay kind of alluded to this, but I'll just kind of point it out. Like, we're happy to have some one-off conversations to talk through some of the details a little bit more, because we don't want any customers to feel like they have to figure this out on their own. We've done countless installs, so we can just see what's the right solution for you. And if that's if the volumes are there, then maybe it's a custom harness directly for your type of equipment. If that's what's needed, then we can talk about that. If it's just as simple as adding an additional splitter to the components of the kit, that's another option too, like I mentioned. So.
Perfect. Thank you, Phil. I'm not seeing any other questions come through. I know we had a few that came through during the presentation. Thank you guys for that. Just for the sake of time, I'll move us along. Just a couple of follow-up things here. We do this training once a month. I'm going to be back again in July. On July 17th, we're going to be talking about diesel exhaust fluid and DEF filtration. So would encourage you guys, go back to the Fleetguard website and sign up on the training link there. We'd love to have you back next month. We're going to be covering that topic in July. I believe August, we're going to be talking about heavy-duty engine coolants, cooling system maintenance. And then in September, we're actually going to be talking about filter media. So different types of filter media, when you use certain types for what applications, and really kind of getting to the science of that particular topic. So if any of those are interesting to you, you can actually go sign up for all three of those out on the training calendar today on fleetguard.com. We'd love to have you guys come back for more, and really appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to be with us today. Keep your engines going with the certainty of filtration science. Want to thank you guys. Hope you all have an awesome Wednesday and rest of your week. And if you have more questions, again, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks.